On February 2, 1999, at 11 a.m., the Falcon 900 carrying Öcalan landed at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport in Nairobi, Kenya. Öcalan was traveling with a fake passport issued by the Republic of Cyprus in the name of Lazarus Mavros. With him were the Greek intelligence officer Savas Kalodoridis, Melsa Denise, traveling with a German identity card issued in the name of Barivan Gunga and with date of birth December 3, 1981, Ayaz Ibrahim, holder of Swedish passport with date of birth January 1, 1959, Aristos Aristidou, holder of Cypriot passport with date of birth June 10, 1949. All passengers entered Kenya legally with a visa stamp in their passport and a completed entry card. Greek ambassador to Kenya, Giorgos Costoulas, was expecting a high-ranking Serbian official, as informed by the embassy secretary. Instead, he was met by Greek intelligence officer Savas Kalodoridis, who then introduced him to Öcalan. The PKK's leader was then transferred to the ambassador's residence. On February 3, Kalodoridis reported to his superiors and received a directive from the director of the diplomatic office in Athens that further communication with the foreign minister's office will only be done verbally, that is, by telephone. Despite this instruction, he and the ambassador decided to document in detail on paper all orders from Athens and events in Nairobi. Kalodoridis was ordered to leave immediately for South Africa, where he would negotiate asylum and secure a passport for Öcalan. At the same time, Mr. Aristidou was instructed to depart as soon as possible, as his mission had officially ended, though a return to Kenya wasn't out of the question. Their departure was scheduled for the very next day. Meanwhile, Öcalan's close associates were preparing to arrive in Kenya in the coming days, tasked with ensuring his security. On February 4, Ambassador Costoulas was summoned to the Kenyan Foreign Ministry, where he was questioned about the passengers on the Falcon. The ambassador stated that he couldn't provide any details regarding the passengers, as the embassy's secretary had handled their arrangements. Nairobi was initially intended as a temporary stop, lasting no more than 3 days, with Öcalan's final destination planned for South Africa. For that reason, Kalodoridis was instructed to travel to Johannesburg and meet George Bezos, a Greek South African human rights lawyer famous for defending Nelson Mandela during the Rivonia trial, in order to persuade Mandela to grant Öcalan asylum. However, Kenyan airport authorities prevented him from traveling. Meanwhile, Athens instructed the ambassador to deny any knowledge of Öcalan's presence in Kenya whenever questioned by Kenyan authorities. In the morning of February 5, the General Secretary of the Foreign Ministry in Kenya, Kathurima, asked Ambassador Costoulas for an update on the Falcon's passengers. The ambassador responded that he did not know the whereabouts of 3 of them, but was aware that one had departed and another had been detained by airport authorities without cause and remained in Nairobi. Kathurima demanded to see the passport of Kalodoridis and agreed with the ambassador to meet the upcoming Monday for that purpose. At 1400 hours, the director of the Greek Foreign Minister's diplomatic office communicated with the embassy and reiterated that Öcalan must be removed from the embassy. His words were, "We did a favor. They shouldn't make us regret it. Let him go on a safari, let him go wherever he wants, just away from national symbols." Seeking an alternative plan, a proposal was made to Athens for Öcalan to be moved to UN premises in Nairobi, where he would surrender and seek asylum. However, Athens rejected the idea and instead instructed the embassy to ensure Öcalan's immediate removal from any association with national symbols. The ambassador and Kalodoridis informed Öcalan of the decision to remove him from the residence. Öcalan, sensing danger, requested political asylum from Greece, submitting a handwritten asylum application in Turkish. The ambassador explained that the Greek government had decided not to grant him asylum for serious reasons and that he was in Kenya by his own consent. Öcalan replied, "Yes, I had agreed to be moved from the embassy residence in Athens, but as of today, I am certain that any step outside of this space, without an official guarantee from any country, will result in my physical destruction. Please request protection from Greece and the local authorities. If asylum is denied, it should be communicated to us through the official and institutional procedures of the Greek authorities. I also ask Greece to take necessary measures for my security and request that the local authorities provide regional security for the residents. Following yet another request from Athens for Öcalan to leave the Greek premises, two of his associates pleaded with the authorities not to pressure their leader. They even went so far as to threaten self-immolation in the garden of the residence as a form of protest. On February 6, Ambassador Costoulas proposed to the Greek Minister of Foreign Affairs that the Seychelles be considered as a potential escape destination for Öcalan. To facilitate the plan, a Greek businessman was entrusted with handling the negotiations. Late in the evening, one of Öcalan's associates was informed by a European source that two of his associates were already on their way to Nairobi. On February 7, Kalourides set out to find Öcalan's associates, but despite his efforts, he was unable to locate them. As the hours passed, he received word that these associates, holding Greek refugee passports, had been denied entry into Kenya. Once again, Athens made a formal request for Öcalan to be removed from any premises linked to Greece. On February 8, the embassy's secretary went to the Kenyan Ministry of Foreign Affairs around 3 p.m. to meet with the Secretary-General, Mr. Kathurima. Once in the office, the Greek embassy's secretary met the head of the protocol service and another individual, whose identity remains unknown, most likely a police or security officer or someone from the presidential entourage. As they sat down, the individuals began questioning the secretary. Where are the ones who arrived? I don't know where 3 of them are, one left, one is here, and this is his passport. What type of aircraft was it? I don't know much about airplanes. Who granted permission for the overflight and landing? Permission was requested through a verbal note. I don't know what happened next with the relevant authorities, air traffic control, or other. The protocol director insisted permission should have been granted in writing. Was a written permit given to us? No. How did the passengers leave the airport? Just like any other passenger. Did these people have a designated mission from the Greek government to inspect embassy premises? Did they come to the embassy? No, these people have absolutely no connection to the Greek government, and they didn't come to the embassy for any work, except for Kalourides, who is complaining about being detained at Nairobi airport without cause. Is this passport fake? No. There is another Greek passport within Kenya with the same details and the same number. This passport is not fake, and I am surprised by the existence of a fake passport with the same number. Investigations are underway regarding the fake passport issue. Who received the passengers from the aircraft? I did. Was the ambassador at the airport? Yes, but he was not there to receive them. February 9 went by with no major developments. Öcalan remained at the residence, where he received daily updates from Kalourides, who provided him with articles from the Turkish press. Among the news, a Hurriyet article stated that Öcalan was expected to be arrested in the coming days. Additionally, as she had been doing since February 2 and every other day, Öcalan's associate, Melsa Deniz, visited the embassy to make phone calls and reassure high-ranking PKK members in Europe that Öcalan was safe and well. These communications were strictly conducted in Greek and were closely monitored by Kalourides. On February 10, a response was received from the Seychelles, with the island nation demanding a sum of $15 million in exchange for accepting the Kurdish leader. The ambassador and his associates began working on scenarios for Öcalan's safe departure to the Seychelles. Among other ideas, they considered transferring him to a farm and having him leave Kenya for Somalia or Tanzania in a small twin-engine plane, which would depart from one of the many dirt airstrips in Kenya. However, the discussion did not lead to a conclusion due to a lack of communication with the Greek Ministry of Foreign Affairs and uncertainty regarding developments in Athens. At 17:30, a man claiming to be Nikos Merakis, a journalist from the newspaper Tevima, called the embassy. He mentioned that it had come to his knowledge that Öcalan was in Kenya and asked to be informed whether this was true. However, the man had a foreign accent, and the embassy staff grew suspicious of his claim. They denied it and promptly ended the phone call. Late in the evening, two of Öcalan's associates arrived at the embassy. They were briefed on the situation and immediately requested to see Öcalan. PKK's leader was briefed on the plan to go to the Seychelles, which he accepted. On February 11, at 10 in the morning, another journalist called the embassy requesting to know if Öcalan was present at the embassy. Embassy staff denied the claim and ended the call. In yet another request for Öcalan to leave the ambassador's residence, he stated that he would only leave if the necessary guarantees were provided, otherwise, it would be extremely dangerous. At 8 o'clock in the evening, a meeting took place at the embassy. The possibility of Öcalan leaving by road to Tanzania with 2 cars was being considered. The plan proposed departure at 4 o'clock the following day, with the crossing of the border around 6 o'clock. The Greek foreign minister reluctantly accepted the plan. However, Öcalan requested concrete and documented security guarantees. On February 12, at around 10 in the morning, Kalodoridis contacted the director of the Greek intelligence service Stavrakakis who, referring to Öcalan, furiously stated, "Tell him he's an idiot. He committed an atrocity. What he did means nothing. It's not valid. Tell him to get the hell out of here quickly and go wherever he wants. We didn't promise him anything. Throw him out, Sovos, let's get this over with. Please, my child." Later that day, Stavrakakis requested the urgent relocation of Öcalan to the Orthodox Church in Nairobi. Kalodoridis and the ambassador went to assess the location of the church. Upon noticing the presence of plainclothes police officers, they quickly returned to the embassy. Later that night, in another attempt to convince Öcalan to leave for the Seychelles, responded that he would only leave the residence if he had a genuine Seychelles passport and would travel to that country via a third country, which he left to the discretion of the embassy. Meanwhile, the ambassador was in contact with a businessman who was willing to arrange vehicles to safely transport Öcalan to a remote location away from Nairobi. From there, a private jet would be provided for his escape from Kenya. Athens approved the plan and urged for swift arrangements. On February 13, the plan to relocate Öcalan to Seychelles was halted as the required official travel documents for PKK's leader were still not delivered. From Athens, Stavrakakis angrily instructed Kalodoridis to forcefully remove Öcalan from the ambassador's residence. Kalodoridis refused the order, stating that it was unacceptable to be asked to use force against Öcalan. In a further escalation, Athens sent a message relaying that 4 Greek intelligence officers from Cairo were on their way to Nairobi, with the mission to evict Öcalan from the residence, if necessary, using force. As tension mounted in the residence, Öcalan's associates once again threatened to self-immolate. One of them later pulled out a firearm and threatened to commit suicide if the pressure on Öcalan continued and their demands were not met. That night, as the 4 Greek officers from Cairo were expected to arrive, the embassy building was evacuated, as everyone braced for what was to come. The 4-member intelligence team dispatched by Athens arrived at the embassy near midday on Sunday, February 14. Codenamed the football team, the unit was under strict orders to remove Öcalan from the embassy immediately and relocate him to a nearby hotel room. The directive was clear: everything had to be concluded by the following day. The 4 officers from the security division of the Greek National Intelligence Service were team leader Ioannis Bobos, Athanasios Spanias, Ioannis Ioannidis, and Stathis, whose surname was not reported. Upon the team's arrival, the team leader, Bobos, reported being under constant close-range surveillance by heavily armed Kenyan and American operatives. Following the team's request for an update on the security situation at the ambassador's residence and the embassy, Kalodoridis informed them that the Kurds were armed, but the exact type of weapons they possessed was unknown. He also reported that they were in possession of a suspicious small Samsonite-type suitcase, which was possibly hiding an explosive device and was extremely heavy. Given these circumstances on the ground, the team's leader decided to abort the operation and declared that he would leave Kenya as soon as possible, regardless of the orders issued by Athens. The team decided to depart the next morning at 7:30, flying with Egypt Air to Athens via Cairo. Among Öcalan's escorts, the atmosphere was a mix of uneasy calm and underlying anxiety about what lay ahead. Later in the evening, Öcalan turned to the ambassador and Kalourides and remarked, "I feel as though this chapter of the story has come to an end." On the early morning of February 15, Costoulas was urgently summoned to the Kenyan Foreign Ministry, where he was presented photographic evidence confirming that the Kenyan authorities were aware of Öcalan's presence at the diplomatic compound. He was also informed that Kenyan police had arrested the Greek team sent from Cairo to Nairobi. Costoulas informed the ambassador that the Kenyan authorities had been aware of Öcalan's presence at the Greek ambassador's residence since his arrival. They were prepared to cooperate with the Greek side to ensure his swift departure from the country and prevent any further damage to Kenya. The authorities offered an aircraft for Öcalan's quick exit to any country he chose, but with one crucial condition: the Greek side must maintain strict confidentiality to ensure that it would never be known that Öcalan had ever set foot in Kenya. The ambassador communicated with Athens, which accepted the Kenyan proposals. Costoulas presented the ambassador with a deadline and requested that Öcalan leave Kenyan soil by 1730. At 1530, the ambassador returned to the embassy and, joined by Kalourides, rushed to the ambassador's residence, where they informed Öcalan with Kenyan authorities' willingness to cooperate to ensure his safe departure from Kenya to any destination of his choosing. The ambassador warned Öcalan that the Kenyan authorities would no longer be able to guarantee his safety at the compound once the deadline had passed. Realizing that the escalating situation posed a potentially deadly risk to everyone at the residence, Öcalan reluctantly accepted, stating that he did not want to create problems for his friends. At 6 o'clock, a Kenya security official arrived at the residence to discuss the details of Öcalan's exit and transfer to the airport, urging him not to delay any further, as any new delay would be at the expense of Öcalan's life, since night was falling. Outside the residence, 5 Kenyan vehicles were waiting to transport Öcalan to the airport. Despite the ambassador's request to have Öcalan transported in a Greek diplomatic vehicle, the Kenyan officers firmly denied this request. Öcalan sat in the back seat of a blue Toyota Land Cruiser, while Kenyan authorities refused to allow any members of the Greek mission to board the same vehicle. As the vehicles departed for the airport, the 3 vehicles at the front of the convoy escorting Öcalan drove off, while the car carrying the ambassador and Kalourides stayed a bit behind. The convoy then took a different route to the airport, citing security reasons and the need for speed. At the airport, the 3 vehicles, one of which was carrying Öcalan, entered the area through a road typically reserved for security vehicles. The remaining 2 vehicles arrived at the airport several minutes later. Öcalan boarded the private jet, believing he was being transferred to a neutral country, but instead, he was met by Turkish intelligence officers who immediately subdued him. He was then transferred to Turkey, where, as of April 15, 2025, he remains in solitary confinement as the sole prisoner on Imrali Island in the Sea of Marmara.